Hello and welcome to another segment of Think About It. It's a time to think about a portion of Scripture and its relationship to our life, whether you are young or whether you are old. I am glad to have with me today Will Harrison. Hello, Will.
Hey, Jerry, how you doing?
I'm
It's good to
great,
be
man.
with you today.
I am excited about you being with us today. We have started this series and into this series of the WhatSoever series that's taken about from Philippians chapter 4. And I have asked you, and you volunteered to take the things, whatever things are pure. Will, tell me a little bit about, this scripture, this passage. What does it mean to be pure?
Yeah, I love this passage, and I love this idea of thinking about all of these different things. And you had those topics out. Purity immediately stuck out to me. I think about when I think about purity. I keep reading that passage, and there's in verse 9 it says, or verse 8 says, think about these things. In verse 9 he says, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, he says, practice these things. And so something that I've learned probably since being a teenager, I had a misunderstanding of purity. I thought purity was something that you had purity, and at some point along the way, decisions you make, decisions I make, cause me to lose purity, whether that's of sexual purity or relational purity or whatever different types of purity. I learned, well, one, there's a lot more to purity than just what I'm doing with my girlfriend. We're called to live pure lives, to live holy lives, and that's with regard to our speech. That's with regard to our actions, with regard to so many different aspects of our lives. And we don't just have purity; we have to become pure. And we learn that through Scripture. You learn that right here in Philippians 4:8 and 9, where he says, whatever things are pure, practice these things, think about these things. There's another passage in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. This is Paul again speaking to Timothy. And he says to Timothy, this is 1 Timothy 4:12. He says, let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith. And then he ends and he says, and in purity. Verse 15 there, Paul also says, practice these things, immerse yourself in them, so that all may see your progress. And so what you see when Paul talks about this, Paul says, you want to be pure, you want to think about pure things, you want to be an example to the believers with your purity. You've got to practice your purity. Well, how do we practice our purity? And that's something I've had to learn. How do I become pure? How do I practice purity? If you want to become like Michael Jordan with a pure jump shot, you've got to practice that jump shot over and over and over. If you want to become like Mike Trout and have the best swing in baseball, you've got to practice that swing over and over and over. It's to become a pure hitter, you have to practice. With regards to our purity, we have to practice. We have to practice doing the right thing over and over and over. And something that has been said recently, something I've heard from my father-in-law, he says it like this, that we need to practice doing the right thing. When it comes to my choices, I need to want to do the right thing. When it comes to how I treat my family, I need to choose to do the right thing. When it comes to treating my enemies, I need to choose to do the right thing. When it comes to my worship, I need to choose to do the right thing. When it comes to my service, I need to choose to do the right thing. When it comes to how I talk, I need to choose to do the right thing. When it comes to what I'm listening to, I need to choose to do the right thing. When it comes to what I'm watching, I need to choose to do the right thing. And when we choose to do the right thing, we're practicing doing the right thing. We're practicing becoming pure. And so going back to what Paul says, he says, you want to be an example to the believers in purity, practice these things. You want to think on things that are pure, think about these things, practice these things, have them constantly before you. And over time, when I'm striving to become pure, that's going to become a normal part of my life. those thoughts that once plagued my mind, those things that I once was so tempted by so often, they're starting to get out of my life, flee the devil, and draw close to God. I'm going to be thinking more about godly things, thinking more pure thoughts. So that's what comes to my mind when I think about thinking about pure things. That's what comes to my mind, Jerry.
Well, it's daily living. It's like you said, it's something that we have to put into practice. And I love the fact, you're not the only one that's actually, when we looked at that whatever or whatsoever list there, everyone has come back and said so far, it's what we put into practice in daily life. It's so important. But
yes,
the key word is practice. Well, the old phrase from days of old, my days of old, practice makes perfect.
yes.
And I think
That's
about
right.
I think about that. It's like you talked about the hitter, the shooter, anything like that. If you want to have clean language, you got to practice clean language. If you want to have clean thoughts, you've got to focus on clean thoughts. It's all basically that. If you want to have a fantastic relationship, you've got to have a pure relationship, And if you want to have a tremendous relationship with God, you got to be pure. And that's
exactly right. Thank you, Jerry, for having me on.
Well, I appreciate you being with us, Will, today. Thank you so much. Folks, thank you so much for watching us tonight, and be back with us again tomorrow night for another segment of this Think About It. Thank you very much. Y'all have a great day.